So, where does your story begin?
So when I was speaking with Sherry earlier, she was saying that one of the things that you were addressing in this particular bit was just kind of, around addiction and stuff like that. And to me, my story really is about deliverance from addiction. And I mean, my story almost begins before I was born, you know what I mean? I believe that I was born with the disease of alcoholism. It runs in my family. It runs through the women of my family, especially on my mother's side. And, in my walk with God, it's just really, it's almost become quite clear to me that it's almost a generational curse, I guess is the only way to describe it, And also, again, the more I learn that the women in my mother's family all had a lot of gifts from God, you know what I mean? And so I just felt it made us more prone to attack, and that's one of the things that's become clear to me. But so I grew up in a teetotal house as a result of my mother being brought up by alcoholics. And so she insisted, so I wasn't around drinking or anything like that, do you know what I mean? And yet I was just drawn to it. From a really young age. So I picked up my first drink at the age of 12. And from that moment on until God came into my life and just took over, I don't think I ever willingly didn't have a drink if I was able to. And that didn't mean that from the age of 12 I was drunk constantly, but you know what I mean? That feeling that if I could, I would, was always there, and always with the idea that it was a solution to my problems. And I think that was the other thing. And my problem really is I didn't feel comfortable in this world. This world was not a comfortable place for me. I didn't think I was good enough. And I couldn't tell you why I thought that. I had no sort of, it's because of this, and this. It was just a deep-seated belief in me that was just very uncomfortable. And I wasn't like other people, that I didn't understand things that other people seemed to get, just like that, And alcoholism is a progressive disease. So for years and years, I kind of just sort of got through life. And actually, sometimes I look back on my life as a young woman and wonder how on earth I could have done any of that without God or without alcohol. I needed one or the other. But because alcohol was already there, although God, I'd been baptized at the age of 18, and that was my choice and things like that. My mother also, I have to put into this, my mother was just a warrior Christian. She found the Lord probably when I was a teenager, and she just went into it all guns blazing, you know what I mean? So, she was speaking into within days of finding the Lord. And it was just, we always say she was one step away from a snake charmer, And so that was kind of in my life, you know what I mean? And I although I found it a little bizarre, some of her behavior, I accepted it for something that really was. So I accepted the Lord into my life. But nonetheless, because I was drinking, there was a barrier between me and him, you know what I mean? And that progressed throughout most of my adult life. And the end of my drinking became really dark and really scary. My children were teenagers, and thankfully, and again, I believe this was just God interceding, the social services became involved with our family, and it very soon became apparent that I needed help. And so they arranged for me to be detoxed at Springfield in Tooting and then go on to a rehab. And that was kind of when the miracle happened, because whilst I was in hospital, I kind of went to that hospital I said to God at that time, and I remember this very clearly, I just, you know what, I cannot do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. You just take this. And kind of what I meant by that is, can you take me? I've just had enough. You know what I mean? I want it all to be finished, but I meant I didn't want to live anymore. And so I got detoxed, and I was doing everything I was supposed to do and listening and everything. And I didn't really notice anything except for that once I'd gotten to the rehab that they sent me to, I just remember waking up one morning and thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't felt like I wanted to have a drink for quite a while now. I can't remember when the last time I was thinking, once I get all this done with or whatever, and then I can drink again. Or I really want to drink. That feeling was completely gone. And I recognized it pretty quickly for what it was, that it was a miracle, because I had never felt like that before in my entire life. And I also need to add at that point, my mom had never stopped praying for me. All the ladies in her church, everybody, I was covered, for years. And another interesting fact about that was my mom was at a full gospel business convention about 20 years before then. And a prophet that was at that convention that she didn't know just walked up to her out of the crowd and said, what's going on with your daughter? It will be okay. It will be finished. And he gave her his book and he signed it to me. And I have that book in my bookcase now. So that promise was made long before I ever got sober. And so really, I guess the thing is, from that moment on, I did leave everything to God. So it's been an interesting journey for me. I've been sober about almost 15 years, and people often say to me, oh, you've done so well. You've worked so hard to get, this life that you now have. And I'm like, I didn't. He did it. I let him, and it really taught me, oh gosh, one, about grace, because, nothing I did deserved what I have today. But two, about just letting go and letting God, you know what I mean? And I try and practice that in all my affairs. And I don't always manage, especially around children and stuff like that. I feel like I need to fix things. But it's also, he's taught me how to listen. So often I'll just kind of get that voice in my ear that when I'm trying to manage a situation, try to manage things, as a control freak before all this happened. And so, and I'll just kind of get that, like, are you going to stop this now and just let me take over? This isn't going so well for you. Maybe just leave it to the experts, And really, that's my story, It's quite a simple story. And from then on, my life is just, he's put people in my path all along the way. I joined the community church well before I got sober. My mom found it online and said, I think this is the church for you. And it was around the corner from where I lived. So I just used to go in there with a mouthful of gum and a tummy full of wine and sit at the back and, run out so I didn't have to talk to anybody. But interesting things like that were one of the first social workers that came to our house. I was trying to convince her what a great person I was and that I didn't need any intervention. And I said, oh, I go to church every Sunday. And she goes, oh, where do you go to church? And I said, oh, the community church around the corner, thinking, oh, well, she's not going to know about that. She goes, oh, I go to that church. And she did. It was Nikki, Nikki and Neil. So that was just an interesting little God incidence, I always find. But, and then it just, all of the people that God's put in my life and in my path ever since then have just been, it's just been a glorious walk, is all I can say, and to this day, I do feel like it's a complete deliverance because I can be around people that drink. It doesn't bother me in the slightest. I don't have a problem with it. And to me, there's nothing short of the miraculous in that because, I also go to AA and I'm quite involved in that. And part of that is because I want to be able to share with people how I got sober and stayed sober, and it's not everybody's, a lot of people, I can clear a room if I mention the word Jesus in a chair. It's great. But it's my truth. It is my truth, you know what I mean? And for me, that's really important. But I do talk to a lot of people that don't seem to have the wonderful, easy time that I do. I just I don't really feel like if I weren't to go to AA ever again, that my sobriety would be compromised because he's just taken it from me. He's taken that and to me, that was the enemy. All of that was the enemy. And and the enemy has no power over my life or the lives of my family. And that was another very strong message that I got pretty early on, was that I had broken something that had gone on for generations in my family. By doing what I did, broke that. So, and I feel that really strongly, you know what I mean? That my children will not have my struggles around that. And that doesn't mean they're not genetically predisposed to not handle alcohol well, but they're not going to walk that walk, you know. And women of my mom's family have walked that walk for, you know, as far back as anybody can see. So to me, it's just a wonderful example of his grace and his power in that, you know. It's huge, you know, and it's changed everything. Our family is completely different as a result of that, you know. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Gretchen, what changed in your thinking about yourself before the time to where you found yourself in this place of deliverance?
That was a slower process, I think, but what it was is that I was loved and I was okay as I was, and there was nothing wrong with me. And so that very much changed. But the other thing that I found that was really interesting is that my behavior just completely changed. Things that I would normally react in a certain way to, in a really negative way, or very, you know what I mean, defensive and stuff, I just found myself not doing that. And it, like, again, it comes back to that I didn't feel like it was me making a conscious decision that I'm going to be this person that's going to do esteemable things. I just was doing them. You know, it was just my natural default setting, you know, which then I guess really helped how I felt about myself, you know, that I was loved and that I was okay.
And if I can ask you one more question, it's an incredible story. It's incredible to hear the power of God at work in your life. A lot of people will be watching this video that might not be struggling with alcoholism, or there might be other things. There might be other things that drag them down into a life of brokenness and inferiority. You know, and I think part of our heart for this series is you know, whilst people look at your story, that they might say, all right, Gretchen's story is not mine, but this is what I can learn from Gretchen's story. What advice do you have for someone that is in a situation that is experiencing hurt or brokenness because of an undisciplined life, because of life choices and things that they've taken a path on that have brought them damage? What advice what words of wisdom are there that you could perhaps leave somebody like that with?
It's not a biggie. It's just literally giving it to God. And I mean, I love that song, Break Every Chain, you know what I mean? It's because that's what it is, because they're all forms of bondage, you know, and it's just, we can't do this stuff on our own. It's not, because it's not made by us, really, is kind of how I feel. So really, it really is just bring it to God and say, you know, I've had enough. You know what I mean? I think do with me what you will was actually my words that I used when I was praying. And so we did, you know, and I really meant it. It's letting go of that last little bit of the towel, if you know what I mean. And you don't have to wait to be in a place of complete and total desperation to do that, you know, just realizing that no matter what we do, we can't be in control of that stuff. And, you know, I think anything that people think willpower is the answer, it's not about willpower, it's about his power. And just saying to him and giving it to him, say, this situation is beyond me. I cannot handle this. I cannot do this. I cannot fix this. Please, could you? And that to me is really the only advice I can ever give anybody, you know? And it seems so simple, and it's not. As humans, it's really hard for us, but it is that surrender. Surrender is a huge word in this for me, you know? Just surrendering to him.
I know that sometimes, especially in situations like this, we bring damage to the relationships around us. And our family, you know, our kids, our spouse. How did your family deal with this, Gretchen?
It took some time. You know, they'd seen a lot of stopping and starting over this, especially the last few years of my drinking. But again, and this is the power of this, is that when I came home, I hadn't seen my children for 3 months. When I came home, and my eldest daughter told me this like a couple of years later, they said, you know, I was still crazy and still just like, you know what I mean? Because I was just finding my feet as a person working in a world without chemical help. But she said there was something so significantly different that they knew somehow it was over. She said there was a very strong sense of that. So that, I think, especially, it's just apparent that something has changed. But the other thing is also just to understand and be patient. It took my kids a long time to sort of forgive me for a lot of the things that had happened. There was a lot of, you know, and I had to make amends to them. And that was part of the AA program, but I kind of knew that anyway. And it was, you know, it was just to say, I am really sorry for what I put you through. You know, and I may not be able to make total retribution for that kind of stuff, but please know how sorry I am. You know, and I feel like from then on, especially with family, that a lot of what I do, and some of it could, you know, sometimes I think I do too much, but just my life is kind of a living amends to my kids, being there to help them with their children, being there. I'm there for them. And if I say I'm going to do something, I do it, because so much of that used to happen that, oh, we'll do this or we'll do that. And then, of course, we didn't because Mommy was drunk. So, you know, or say if I was in some other kind of a situation, you know what I mean, that I just, because of that situation, I wouldn't be able to fulfill what I had promised to do. So I do try and do that till to this day. So, but part of it is just, and forgiving yourself, you know, and when you start to forgive yourself, that breaks some of that, you know, if you're not walking around constantly just being upset and hurt and whatever, but you know what I mean, just like, okay, that happened because I wasn't very well, but I am now, you know. So I think it is, but it's also just understanding that it may take some time. People might not necessarily automatically trust you with the things that before they couldn't trust you with. It's kind of a really important, and you know, and part of coming out of any of those situations is also just being aware of the damage that you've done, and not in such a way, you know, I think we don't regret the past, but we don't forget it. We don't shut the door on it. You know, that stuff did happen. Let's not pretend it didn't. But this is a new day.